not blind, and I don't think we're stupid. I think we have a pretty strong sense of how to measure whether or not we are acting in the interest of our country and of the globe, and particularly of our allies like Israel and Gulf states and others in the region. We are absolutely determined that this would be a good deal or there'll be no deal.
The Israelis are apoplectic about what we're doing. I've never been more worried about the Obama administration's approach to the Mideast than I am now. We seem to want deals worse than anybody else in the region. Thank God for France and thank God for pushback.
Well, in Geneva, it was said to be a deal in the making with Iran, the P5+1 plus Iran on a nuclear arms deal. It kind of fell apart. It's still in negotiations, but it's said that France wanted tougher terms for Iran. We're back with the panel. Steve, there's different reporting about this. Secretary Kerry says Iran stepped away from the table. The bottom line is the deal, the big deal, is not done yet.
Well, that's good news for pretty much everybody. I mean, it's the stories about how this actually came to be or came not to be are fascinating, where you have one report in The Guardian today with the French foreign minister hurrying to sort of intervene before the United States and Iran could agree on a bad deal, and then making his case and ultimately persuading Secretary Kerry. But, you know, look, the French deserve credit for leading on this. It's not what I would have predicted at the beginning of these talks. It's very clear that Israel is deeply concerned. I don't think that this is new. When you look at the statement that Prime Minister Netanyahu made last Friday, it was a scathing denunciation of this would-be deal, delivered, it should be noted, in English, I think for a reason. The kind of talk we really haven't heard from them. But if you go back to his meeting at the White House and then the speech that he gave at the United Nations a short time later, it's very clear that he thinks that Israel is on its own.
And Congress seems like it's anxious in a bipartisan way to get involved in these discussions, possibly passing more sanctions from Capitol Hill.
Right, not to actually reach a deal to increase our leverage and tighten sanctions. It really is interesting. I mean, what Steve said is really, to me, the only thing that matters. There's no deal with the Israelis strongly, vigorously opposing this and rejecting it. The path to a deal is through something that Israel can live with. Obviously, Senator Graham is right. President Obama's domestic agenda is in the toilet right now with Obamacare, and he's desperate for a deal. I think he'll keep on trying for one, and maybe he can get somewhere if he changes the terms, but you can't get to a deal and leave Israel saying this is a terrible deal. And I think forcing the issue of peace talks with the Palestinians at the same time is really a mistake. I think they should stick to a deal on Iran and nukes, and then and get some verification in exchange for sanctions relief, and put off the Palestinian peace talks for another time.
Let me show this from our Bing.com site. If you say, will a deal ultimately be reached with Iran? 90% say no, 10% say yes. Charles.
Well, the 90% ought to be that it shouldn't be reached on these terms. The Israelis are not the one who stopped this. The Israelis weren't even in Geneva. It was the French who stopped it. The French foreign minister called it a suckers deal, and the French have been at negotiations for several centuries, and they know one when they see one. And the reason this is a suckers deal is this. It's quite simple. The only reason that the Iranians are at the table is because the economic sanctions are so strict and so harsh right now that the regime stability is threatened. The only way Iran would ever give up nukes ever is if the regime has a sense that it is threatened. That's the only thing that would stop them. And they are now beginning to worry about economic instability in the country. So here we are at a point of maximum leverage. And what does this so-called deal offer? It relieves the Iranians. It changes, it weakens the infrastructure of the sanctions, allows the Iranians to deal in oil and gold, and gives them a doubling of their cash on hand, which would relieve the pressure. And it does nothing about the infrastructure of their nuclear program. In other words, it takes away our leverage and it gives them a free ride. That's why the French walked away, and that's why if we conclude anything like this, it will be a disaster.
That is it for the panel.